Well, if you want to go ahead and give us your name, your pronouns, and what you're here to discuss, and also how you're doing tonight, I'd like to know that as well.
Yeah, you can call me Weatherfish. I use any pronouns, but he, him's easy. It matches my voice. And it's a little rough to be in weather and climatology right now, and might be getting into that in a little bit.
I can imagine so.
Just to get it out of the way, I'm very happy to be here. For better or for worse, all of our ripped folks that are proponents of leftist ideals, there lots of scandals going around. I'm hearing lots of hate brigades. You seem like you've been pretty unscathed by that. Maybe because you've taken a break recently, but you might be the future. You might be able to be first to hit like 10 mil subs or something. Who knows?
Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it, but I appreciate your enthusiasm nonetheless.
Just stay out of trouble.
All right, we'll do. I'll do my best.
Okay. So, just to sort of start out, I'm
Mhm.
sure you've seen they've been trying to gut NOAA.
No, I've not heard of or seen this.
NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They're in charge of like taking care of all of our weather data, making sure that that's all provided and people have access to it. They're a huge aggregator of that data, and it's really important that we have them in so that way we can predict the weather.
Oh, I did hear about that. Okay. Yes, I have heard
Yeah.
that.
So NOAA and the USGS are two of the largest like weather, climate, geological data aggregators on the planet. Like, and it's not even close. The only one that's like a close second is the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, and even then it's not that close.
Hmm.
And they're mostly for the UK. The America's we're the only one that really puts a lot of effort into collecting global data because, you know,
Right.
unfortunately, weather does not stay confined to your nation's border, no matter how big of a wall you put there.
Right.
Accurate weather forecasts require that we have this global data. We have to aggregate it. They send up weather balloons. And if you look at the budget, if Americans had to pay for it as is, it'd be about $30 per person per year to fund all of it. And of course, with how our taxes work, it's disproportionately paid for by the wealthy. But like if they wanted to turn it into some sort of paid for service, that'd be about what you're looking at.
Okay, that's not bad by any stretch.
Well, if that's every single person though, so if you're got a family of four or something,
Hmm.
that'd be, you know, like
Oh, that's a
120.
fair
Yeah,
point.
like it's every single person. So that's
Yeah,
not
that's a fair
working
point.
people.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking very individualistically, where it's like I could totally do $30 a month, but maybe that's just me
yeah,
being a bougie piece of shit. Who knows?
yeah. There's and that would be there. I mean, they're broadly trying to gut a lot of government services, so that'd be stacked on top of a lot of stuff. And this is paid for free. Tons of people benefit from it, which is why I'm kind of confused, like what the benefit of cutting it is. I have some suspicions, but I was wondering if you might have had any ideas as to why they'd want to gut something like that.
Well, really, the only thing I can think, and it's the simplest answer, but we're gonna Occam's razor this. If I had to take a stab in the dark, it's that they're literally just gutting anything they think they can get away with. And conservatives famously have either just outright said global warming isn't real, climate change isn't real, or that it's a good thing, or that it's natural, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. So like they don't feel a need for like, and you can just look outside and see the weather, bro. Why do we need a national government organization for it? Like that, things like that. And when they gut any kind of program, Medicare and Medicaid, like we were talking about earlier in the stream, all of that money goes to oligarchs. It goes to like a dozen or so people. Like that's where they're sending it. So anything that they can take money out, like rip money away from, all that money gets piled up and just goes to the top 1%. That's my best guess.
Okay. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Republican Party has had a long history of being pretty adversarial with NOAA. I'm not sure if you remember, but back in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina and George Bush's failed response to that, that was like a really big deal back then. And NOAA was very much involved. in that and like the weather service, but it was sort of a push in the opposite direction where a lot of conservative people were like, okay, we want better hurricane forecasting and stuff. And that was one of the things that Obama did deliver on. As much as he was kind of a letdown, he did build out some of that infrastructure. And since
Hmm.
then, you know, a lot of it's had to do with improvements in computing, but our forecasting ability has gotten much better since then.
Hmm.
But a major change happened with Trump, specifically in 2017. I'm not sure if you remember, but there was like a whole thing with Sharpie Gate where a hurricane forecaster was in the office with Trump, or it might have been 2019. I'm not sure if I'm remembering correctly, but I believe it was Hurricane Dorian, and they showed like the projected map. I'm sure you can pull it up on your stream,
Yes, I
the
have it up.
image of Sharpie Gate. So basically, ever since then, Trump has been just. Oh, sorry, I forgot to finish explaining what happened. Trump took a Sharpie and he extended out the path of the hurricane and basically said like it's going to hit here, and the forecasters are like it's not, like what are you doing? And he was like, and he's been just super aggro to the weather service ever since then. At
Mm.
the end of the
So
day,
he was wrong
yeah,
once, and the weather service was like, actually, you're wrong. And he just never got over it. That's crazy.
yeah, there's like a really famous picture of it with him up there, but
I feel like I've seen that.
he's been just really spiteful to the weather service as a whole since then, which is really interesting because like he, at the end of the day, he's not really like the other oligarchs. He's more motivated by spite than anything else. And I just get the feeling that he just has a lot of spite for them for basically like telling him that he was wrong
Sounds like
more
him.
than anything else, because there's no benefit to it. Like the people that would serve to benefit the most would be people, would be groups like Allen Media Group that owns the Weather Channel and like a bunch of the local weather news shows, like all the, like you have your Fox 15, 18, 11, 9, whatever it is,
Hmm.
all through like the more rural parts of America. That's all owned by Allen Media Group, and they don't benefit from that. Like the Weather Channel does all their work for them, they just repackage it and sell it. Like they don't
Hmm.
lose money to the weather or to NOAA. Like people aren't looking at the NOAA forecasts instead of them. I have a small theory, which is that they want to like compete with Google and Apple and basically like prevent them from providing their weather service that they do, and like basically try to monopolize it. Though I don't know how well that would go. Yeah, that's sort of the main thing that I have, but I don't think Allen Media Group could afford that. I don't think they rake in enough revenue unless they'd be planning to like take it all over. They the web, like all of the every we have hundreds of weather offices, I think, all over the country. It could be like low hundred, somewhere between like 1 and 300. I'm not sure the exact number,
Hmm.
as well as many small monitoring stations. Each of those costs in the order of a couple tens of thousands of dollars, and we have, I think, over 1 million of those just scattered around. Farmers rely on that data. And then all of those weather offices, every day, they launch at least 2 weather balloons, and those are expensive. They do sounding, they run them like clockwork. There's helium there. You have to launch those. It's fairly expensive,
Right.
but you need all of that to run the weather models. So we also help other countries and help aggregate the data that other countries do when they do the exact same thing. We have weather satellites. And so if we like shut down NOAA and then shut down cooperation with other countries, that's everybody's weather forecasting gets worse because you need the global data for it to work.
Hmm.
If you have like a big black hole of weather data and you can't see what's going on there, it gets much more difficult to forecast anything.
Can you talk about how that will impact farmers specifically and what that can mean for like production and like I don't know if you have any insight as to like grocery prices or anything. Um, do you have any
Yeah.
comments on that?
Yeah, man, I really wish I had like Kowalski from Nebraska here or something, to
Hmm.
sort of bounce my ideas off of. Maybe I saw Sake was here earlier. Maybe he can be summoned. I don't know, but
I mean, if you whoever you'd like to bring in who you think will add to the conversation, we can.
Kowalski knows a lot. I'm not sure if you could DM him to ask. I know a little bit about agricultural meteorology, but I don't deal with that as a primary thing. I've done some frost forecasting before. That's one of the really
Okay,
big things that they do.
that's fine. Let's just stick with what you know
Yeah.
then.
I mean, I certainly know a little bit. I couldn't speak with confidence and depth about it. I know there's like frost forecasts that they need that determine when they want to harvest and do their first planting that they
Hmm.
heavily rely on. There's water resource forecasts, and that's done a lot through the USGS. And then the Army Corps of Engineers are responsible for a lot of that. Of course, we had Trump dump a big reservoir for no reason in California, and a lot of that water would have went to agriculture. So like it's going to hurt farmers, but the farmers that rely on this the heaviest are like corn farmers in like Iowa, like the upper Midwest especially.
Hmm.
They get severe storms there that they really need forecasts on, and because like if there's a big storm that knocks down all your plants and that's you're done. And there's also like subsidies we have for farmers that they're trying to gut right now that can help them if that damage occurs. Like you get a big windstorm comes through. I'm not sure if you could pop open a tab, just
Sure.
look up derecho, Derecho corn damage, like uh, like a cornfield. You can just see it'll flatten all of it. It can topple grain silos and granaries, and there's subsidies that we have in place and insurance that the government provides to those farmers to help make sure that that doesn't damage it. And that
Hmm.
damage can be mitigated as well by having good forecasting. There's not a lot you can do, but there's some things you can do that would be a whole off in the weeds thing to get into.
Hmm.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, that's that's your livelihood. You know, you've got 200 acres out there. A lot of it's corporate farmland, you know, owned by Monsanto or like whatever Wall Street firm ultimately owns it.
Right.
But you know, most of our corn goes into animal feed and ethanol. So this actually is probably going to have a pretty significant impact. I don't want to say significant, but you might notice a few cents at the pump if we have worse corn production, since one of the big uses for corn is ethanol, and we use that for
Hmm.
gasoline.
Hmm.
So, like, we don't eat much corn. I think we eat like 1% of what we grow, or somewhere around there.
Okay. If you don't mind, let's go back to our gutting of Noah.
Yeah,
How will the, because the reason that I remember us discussing you coming on was climate change.
yeah.
Does this impact climate change and our efforts toward mitigating it? And if so, how and how badly?
A lot of the toothier stuff to do with the government and climate change comes to an EPA ruling.
Hmm.
I think it was from 2008 or 2010 that basically said that carbon dioxide and anthropogenic climate change represent like harm to industry or whatever, and that is responsible for justifying like all the regulations we put in, like emission standards and stuff. And I think they already got rid of that, or they're in the process of doing that. The NOAA is hugely responsible internationally for what we know about climate change, but
Hmm.
they've also been severely underfunded. Like this isn't really new. Climate research is so underfunded that like independent researchers can produce valuable data. People like Paul Beckwith, I follow him pretty
Hmm.
closely online. He's somewhat of an independent researcher. He has a YouTube channel. He gets, you know, a couple $20,000, and it's mostly modeling. Like NOAA's collected all the data. They're just not allowed to put it together and explain that, you know, the climate change in the corner.
Right, right. They're
Um,
on the ground collecting the numbers, the raw
yeah,
data,
but they're
but
not
other
allowed to
people,
talk about it.
right,
Yeah,
other people are putting it together and saying this pattern is here, that one's there, etc.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Um, so
So that
it,
would entail then, since they're already severely underfunded, gutting them even further would mean that we just simply won't have the raw numbers to work with to know how even bad it gets.
yeah, yeah, that's one of the important things they do. They collect the raw data for free It's completely aggregated. There's no paywalls. Just you can download all of it. You can download the entirety of like all the NOAA.txt file databases. I think it's a couple hundred gigabytes, but that's like it. I think Wikipedia, just the text on it, it's like 16 terabytes or something like that, and it's
Wow.
like 100 or 200 more if you throw in all the photos.
Hmm.
So like it's something like an individual could store. You know, I mean, it'd be a few $1,000s, but like if you wanted to back up all of the NOAA data, you could do it. And there's people
Wow.
that do. Yeah, like you could store that. You could store the entirety of all the NOAA data on like a modern like PC. If you have
Right.
like a 2 or 4 terabyte hard drive, you can store it all. You just have it.
Damn. Okay.
So well, the one thing that they haven't done is they haven't used like newer types of bloated coding language to like write all of that stuff.
Hmm.
So while some of their sites look janky as a result of that, it means that it's like very efficient space wise for like data aggregation. Um, and running everything. The weather models all run on Python, but the data that they're fed is collected through other systems. Though they are transitioning over, or they were. Biden put a bunch of money in with the Inflation Reduction Act to help modernize NOAA, and that's all gone now, or at least it's frozen.
No surprise there.
Yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act was. I mean, the Republicans were screeching about it, but it was a little bit of a light Green New Deal. It didn't do much, but it did lay some of the groundwork that would make it easier for somebody to like expand upon it in the future.
Hmm.
Like if you have zero green infrastructure, you it's super hard to build it out. But if you have like 1% of what you need, you're a lot further along than if you have to like train everybody. If you have some people that are already trained, they can train other people and you can get the ball rolling. But if nobody has those skills at all, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, I imagine. Let's talk more broadly about climate change, if that's okay with you, and where we're at with that.
Yeah.
Because we touched on that a little bit during the call-in stream. I'd like to just, maybe over the next 10, 15 minutes, just kind of get an idea of where we're at now, how bad it is, and how bad it's going to get how quickly.
All right. So I'm sure you've heard of Sabina Hassenfelder. I don't like her very much, but she did bring to public attention something I'd been aware of for a few years in one of her
Oh,
videos.
no, not her.
She's shifted a lot since when she put it out, but it was sort of like a backhanded attack at climate scientists, but she did bring up something called the hot model problem, which is where we had a bunch of weather models that were climate models, my bad, that were
Hmm.
showing about 5 degrees of warming off of our like more aggressive efforts to mitigate it,
Hmm.
and that had to do with cloud brightening. And we can drop her now because she had very little to offer other than just bringing up and naming the paper. That's how she operates. She has like one good paper that she'll bring up, and then she'll just yap nonsense for the rest of it.
Yeah, I've gone
um
over one of her videos before, which was really funny because it seemed like she was trying to discredit climate science, but then she was saying, no, actually, it's worse than they're saying it is, which is
yeah
probably
I
true. But then she's like, this is why you shouldn't trust them at all. And the entire comment section was
yeah
filled with,
it's
well, no, I don't. And it's like, you're just content farming. You're not actually like trying to fix anything.
yeah she's terrible. If you want a
Yeah,
good if you want a good science education channel, I Professor Dave, he's really good.
I've heard of him.
I would highly recommend him, especially with some of his topic content that he's done on climate change. I feel like it's a lot better perspective for somebody who doesn't know much on it to come at it from.
Hmm.
Um, he's he explains in some detail, but I think his content broadly is pretty approachable
Hmm.
as like a layperson. Like if you were to like watch his video and like the government can't create hurricanes, that sort of thing, um,
Hmm.
you could understand it. It might be a little bit difficult. You might have to rewatch it a couple times, but like it's something that's like able to be parsed as just like a layperson.
Okay. So, climate change, where are we at with it?
It's pretty bad right now.
So
Um,
I've heard.
uh, yeah, I can just briefly review what I had said previously, but
Sure.
we banned sulfur and heavy shipping fuel oil. And oh god, get her off of the screen.
Hmm.
Sabina, I don't want to look at her.
She's not
um,
on there anymore.
oh, there we go. Okay, I
You're
might be a little bit behind.
oh, you're fine.
Oh yeah, there we go. Um, yeah, so that sulfur in the ship oil, which is it's a type of crude oil. It's low levels of processing, and when that gets burned, it creates sulfuric acid and
Hmm.
sulfates, and those provide condensation nuclei, which is what little water droplets form around. It needs a little something in the air. It could be like a bacteria, a little bit of dust, some salt in the air, and so it increases the amount of clouds at like low level over shipping lanes, which are more common in the northern hemisphere, and it also, sorry, I'm just pulling something up right now. It also brightens clouds, so it makes them whiter, which is really important.
To bounce off the sunlight.
Yeah. Here we go. This is one of the like more I DM'd it to you. You should be able to pull that up. It sort of
Yep.
shows the rough area of where that like sulfur from the fuel is, and it's bad because it contributes to acid rain. But honestly, with how bad climate change is going to be, it's
Yeah.
not really comparable in the damage.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a drop of poison as compared to like the whole bucket. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
I hear you.
so this is essentially doing a type of geoengineering that we could do, which is putting aerosols into the air to sort of mask the warming that we're getting.
Hmm.
Major volcanic eruptions can do this, but they don't always do that. I can follow up on that because that leads to another thing that happened recently.
Hmm.
But it causes a cooling effect. The little ice age that they had in Europe, there's a big volcanic eruption in Indonesia, I believe, or it might have been the Philippines. I can't remember which one it is, but somewhere in Southeast Asia. Um, and that masks the warming, but it doesn't sequester any CO2. So all the carbon dioxide is still there. And if you want to continue keeping Earth the same level of habitability, you have to keep putting more and more aerosol into the air. And if you wanted to do it really long term, you could put mirrors or like particulates in space and orbit around the Earth. So you could put
Hmm.
like a big dust up there, little specks of aluminum foil, whatever, and you could put it way out in high orbit. And that could block like 1% of sunlight and do a pretty good job masking it for a while. But there's other problems with carbon dioxide besides just the warming it has that would make that a really bad idea.
Yeah.
And instead, if we wanted to do geoengineering, we really need to focus on things that actually sequester the carbon dioxide and take it out of the air instead of just masking its effects. So I honestly expect the more temporary solution, like we're going to use aerosols for geoengineering. Like by the time we get to the 2040s, 2050s, I expect that to be like a mainstream right wing position, because that would allow us to continue using fossil fuels and like not have to suffer the worst effects of climate change. So this is something that isn't necessarily something that climate scientists have to be prepared to debate on right now, but like we very much this is going to be like a hot topic in the future. It's
Okay.
going to be like,
So
oh,
to
what kind
speak.
of geoengineering? Yeah, yeah, it's going to be something that's not in the immediate future, but like long term, like if you can just like lay the seeds of just like saying that this is bullshit or like we really shouldn't do this, which I can explain, and there's a lot of good reasons why we don't want to do this. But that's going to
Hmm.
be like a battle line, because climate change is going to get to the point like no sane political party can ignore it. I guess you could have like some of the fascist cult parties, but like if fossil capital wants to continue, and I really hope we can stamp it out for the most part by like
Hmm.
the end of the 2030s, but if we can't, like this is gonna be where the battle lines are.
It's going to be like but at a certain point, it's going to be like you might as well believe the Earth's flat.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And indeed a lot of Republicans at the moment do, because we're reaching that level, like we're there.
Yep.
um Trump is a holdover. All the newer like groiper Republicans and stuff. They're like disingenuously pro-nuclear. Like they'll admit that they believe in climate change, but there's not anything we can do about it, or oh, it's actually good or whatever. But they different lines, and those are going to continue shifting. But I think Trump is really the last hurrah of like climate denialism. So that's not real. That's not really where the fight is right now. You could bring on a climate denialist, onto your stream and absolutely wreck their arguments, just for the memes. But nobody, I won't say nobody, because there's certainly like some old people that do, but they're in denial more than anything. Like they're not like
Yeah.
Trump knows climate change is real. He believes it,
Well,
or he
they all
says he
do.
believes it disingenuously. Yeah, it's more something that you can have like peace of mind with.
Hmm.
I don't think it's like a real position that many people have. Of course, if this video blows up and there's people out there that see this and they're like, oh no, I know for a fact climate change is fake. It's made up by the Chinese government, and we're just controlling hurricanes to destroy red states or something like that. I'm sure they'd
Yep.
love to come on, and that'd probably be fun for you. But I don't think that's a mainstream position. Like I don't think that's the line anymore.
Yeah, I think you'd be luckier, or not luckier. I think you'd be more likely to find somebody who's like, yeah, it's real, but like it's a natural cycle, and we're all gonna be fine, and you don't have to worry about it or change anything. We don't need any policy, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think it's less that like people don't believe it, and more that people don't believe we should be doing anything about it or that it matters, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
that's the line right now, is fighting
Yeah,
against the doomerism.
yeah.
And so that's why I'm very concerned seeing that there's a lot of doomerism on the left about climate change, because that's literally just I sound so like tired saying it, but that's why,
Mhm.
like, you know that's why you got to keep fighting it.
Yep.
There's always more you can do.
So,
And a lot of people,
mhm.
yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
A lot of people will say like, oh, there isn't anything we can do about it, it's not worth it. But like I fully believe that those narratives are like amplified on social media by like oil companies and stuff, because that absolutely benefits them. If you don't believe that there's anything we can do, or like we're screwed anyways, so like why bother? They're making money, they're not getting flack. That's it works out very well for them.
I don't want to be America centrist or America centric. I don't like doing that, but we only have limited time. So
Mhm.
let's talk about just the United States, right? The average
Yeah.
person, and I know it varies from region to region, but like the average person in the United States, maybe like take somebody who's coastal, take somebody who's more midland, south, north, whatever. What are the implications for the average person? Like, what are we going to have to deal with in the coming years?
Okay. So there is something really important that I need to bring up,
Hmm.
to have this conversation. Um, Here we go. I'm going to also send that to you. And it is something known as the AMOC. That stands for the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. It's a mouthful. And that was the plot of The Day After Tomorrow, which,
I saw that movie.
wait, The Day After. I think that's the right movie.
Well, that's the one where
Yes, the
there's
2004 one. Yeah, where
there's like
you know,
ice so bad that it like instantly freezes everything
yeah,
around it. Yeah,
um, definitely exaggerated, but
of course.
it's also not wrong. That the AMOC is a big conveyor belt that transfers heat from the southern hemisphere. It's not just the tropics. The entire southern hemisphere is cooled by the AMOC. I'm sure you can see that big plume of cold water. It goes around the entire globe, transferring just in amount of heat energy that is quite frankly incomprehensible. Like
Mhm.
it's not even worth comparing it to like the global energy output. It's like fractions of a percent. Like it's an inordinate amount of heat and water that is moving through this process. And it is driven by surface wind and salinity. So
Mhm.
we have a minor issue, or maybe a little bit more than that. Greenland is melting really fast. And that means that at the poles, we've known this for decades now, but all that fresh water that melts off of Greenland lowers the salinity at the North Pole, which is supposed to be, or well, not exactly the North Pole, but like south of Greenland, which is supposed to be a very high salinity, since all that water that's carried north is supposed to be warm and it's evaporating the whole time, so it should be leaving behind more salt,
Right.
which is what primarily drives it. Like you get all the Gulf Stream, huge amount of warm water, warms the entirety of Europe and a good part of Russia as well. And that is supposed to, make the water saltier and saltier, and then it finally gets so salty and dense because salt water is denser than fresh water that it sinks to the bottom of the ocean after it's cooled down, and it circulates all the way around, and then it upwells in the southern hemisphere. A good bit of it off the coast of South America. Yeah, there's a lot of places of upwelling, but the deep ocean layer where it's the bottom of the ocean, you go to the Marianas Trench, that's tropical. It's still like freezing down there. Like it's like 31 degrees at the bottom of the ocean no matter where you go.
Right.
And it's in large part because of some of these deep water currents. There's other things that go into it, but that heat energy conveyor belt is super important for regulating our climate. And what this does is it pushes a bunch of warm water in the Atlantic from what would be off of like Argentina and like South Africa, like that. They're closer to the equator than like Florida is. So
Hmm.
like that should be where the warm pool is, but instead what you see, and I think this is actually a much better image for me to send to you to just sort of illustrate that.
Okay.
But what you get is that all of that warm water from off of like Africa, it all goes up into the Caribbean, and that causes the entire tropical rain belt to be shifted northward, like more into like Venezuela and like the Sahel region of Africa, India, Southeast Asia. And you know what all those places have in common? That's where people live. Like that's where like all the people are, is in that area. And if you go south the same distance, it's just water. Like
Right.
I mean, you've got Australia, but for the most part, it's water. There's a
I
lot
mean,
less land there.
it's just Australia. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
that much.
uh,
I understand.
Still, like Australia is not India, and
Right.
if the AMOC shuts down, although it's not the most visible impact to your median Amerifat, sitting on their couch enjoying their little treatler goodies from China, which
Okay.
are now cut off uh, due to
Uh-huh.
tariffs.
True. True.
Um, but you know, so what that's going to do is this is going to be where a lot of that mass starvation comes from, because if that water is no longer brought upwards into like the Atlantic and the northern part of the Indian Ocean,
Hmm.
like all that water is going to be colder. That's less evaporation. That's less rain. So what you end up doing is you shift the tropical rain belt south. So instead of that water falling over Southeast Asia, India, the super populated parts of, Central America, northern part of South America, Mexico, Florida, all of those areas that receive tons and tons of rain and where we grow a ton of food. Even places like Nigeria has a ton of people. I think they're like 400 million people, something like that.
Hmm.
It's a lot of people live there, and they're all their water is going to get cut off because those that rain's going to be falling over open ocean instead. And so that's going to
Mm.
be like, you've heard about climate change causing mass starvation. That's going to be what causes it. The
So
tropical rain
basically,
belt
drought
shifts.
is what we're
Yeah,
looking at.
there. It's a little bit more complicated over the Sahara because the warming is actually causing the West African monsoon to grow more intense, which is going to cause the Sahara to gradually green as the planet warms. It's a little bit complicated. It's a little bit uncertain, but I feel like based off of what I've read, I could say pretty confidently that it's far more likely than the Sahara becoming drier.
Hmm.
But that still means that like India, southern China, Vietnam, basically the entirety of Indonesia, all of which are major food producing regions, like all your spices and stuff,
Yep.
Those all come from there. Your bananas come from Central America. They're all going to get a lot drier, and there's going to be a lot less food there. And there's just, quite frankly, there's not that much agricultural land in other areas. I mean, I guess if those rain belts shift south, that would cause Australia to get wetter. But like, I have a feeling it's. I don't think there's going to be a benefit to it. It's just going to be more suffering. There's
Right.
so much land area in those regions in Africa.
Hmm.
I'm sure you can see like it's just north of the equator. Like that's where all the water is being carried to is off of Africa, and that it's such a huge food region. Like I do not see this
So
not resulting in mass
we're
starvation.
we're looking at more rain where there shouldn't be rain, less
Yeah.
rain where there should be rain, lots of
Mhm.
drought in those areas, lots of lack of, so that'll impact food production, that'll impact exports of food.
And since it's a
Obviously,
global food market,
yeah.
all of those people are going to be competing with Americans, and we have a lot more money, so they're probably going to be starving while we still have food. But your food's going to get more expensive since there's going to be all those billions. I think like
Hmm.
3 billion people roughly depend on the AMOC for their food supplies to be consistent for the
Hmm.
rain. And there, I mean, there still might be some agriculture that takes place there, but like it's not going to be the same.
Okay.
So those areas have two options basically. They starve or they heavily invest in desalination technology so that way they can continue growing food even when the rain stops,
Hmm.
which is something that might happen. And this is going to be a huge issue in the future. But that's not the end of AMOC. That's like step one. That's the big one, but it's actually less visible. With AMOC slowing down, it also pulls a lot of water off of the eastern seaboard of the US. I'm sure if you can pull up the previous image, it shows it a little bit better. But that Gulf Stream, all that water is going off of the coast. So without that water stream pulling water off of the coast, you would very quickly, as it shuts down, notice like 5, 6 feet of sea level rise, somewhere around
Oh
there,
boy.
off on the entirety of the U.S. eastern seaboard, because that Gulf Stream is no longer pulling out into the eastern Atlantic Ocean. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, water levels, like the sea level in Europe, like off the coast of France, is a bit higher than it is off of the U.S. East Coast.
Hmm.
And that doesn't even factor in stuff like the Thwaites Glacier collapsing, which is going to, that's one of those tipping points. And the reason it's a tipping point is because now that it's collapsed, it's going to start falling into the ocean, and that means that sea level rise, instead of a trickle off of Greenland, it's going to be a big flow off of Antarctica, and that's going to cause sea level rise to go from millimeters per year to centimeters per year. So like from here out, it's going to be rising faster, just like the baseline.
So Florida's screwed, obviously.
Well, we love to make our jokes about Florida being screwed, but it really kind of isn't. At least for a while, the Everglades are going to be the most heavily impacted. What it really looks like is the storms come in, and then the water doesn't go out quite as far as it did the last time, and you just
Okay.
repeat that. But Florida's wealthy enough, like if they have to, they'll build levees around Miami. They'll build levees around, or Orlando's, a few feet off of sea. I think they're like 70, 80 feet off of sea level.
Hmm.
Um, it's going to really impact a lot of the coastal stuff, but there's ways you can work around it. I as much as we like to joke about it, it's really going to be the global south that's going to be dealing with this more than like Florida.
Right.
And it's also going to be like the rural Gulf Coast, like Texas. A lot of people in Florida and like politicians and, the oligarchs that call it home, they know that the sea level's going up and that it's going to hit Florida really hard. So there's plans in place for Florida to, build that out, help, if it's dredging, shoring up sea lines, whatever it is, to prevent it from sinking into the ocean. They're ready to do that, but there's much more rural areas where they're not going to have the money for that, and it's just going
Right.
to be like, okay, this land is
And
now uninhabitable swamp.
and because it's going to hit the global south hardest, what that means is we're going to have a migrant crisis on our
Oh
hands.
yeah, oh yeah.
Huge
If you
swaths of
thought
people. Yeah, go ahead.
if you thought their food getting cut off was bad, think about how much worse it's going to be when their house is underwater.
Yeah.
Like it really scares me, the extent to which I expect reactionary sentiment to grow during that process.
I mean, we could be
Like
looking at
the
war.
the anti-immigrant sentiment, however bad you think it is right now, like unimaginable horrors will be committed to immigrants unless like left-wing parties broadly that can provide a counter narrative to, like right-wing reactionaries, which is why I think it might actually be a kind of a good thing that they're taking power now, because it's going to be very recent in the minds of a lot of people in the West how like disgusting that rhetoric is.
Mm.
And I feel like we're going to have rejected it by the time where the migrant crises get really bad. Like we're going to already have moved past that. That's my hope, at least.
We can hope so.
Because I think they're playing their cards early. If I were to be a strategist for like the right wing, I would hold off on the anti-immigrant rhetoric until like climate change ramps up, so that way like you get maximum people in support. The left has the hardest time defending it. Like they're kind of consolidating early, which is a narrative sort of across the board. I think they were expecting more resistance, and they weren't expecting to get into power until like the mid to late 2030s, like fully. And
Mhm.
they've got it all now. Like the Dems have laid over no resistance,
Right.
and so they're sort of putting all their cards into these buckets before the crises that they're sort of hyping up right now that don't really exist. Like they're pushing it, and they don't exist. So like
I
they're wasting
think
effort.
I'm going to push back a little bit on this. I think that
Hmm.
you're giving them a little bit too much credit. I think that a lot of them don't know this is coming, at least as bad as it is. And I think
Hmm.
that like they are just like like they would absolutely jump at the opportunity, but I don't think conservatives are smart enough to plan ahead and be like, well, we're going to wait until the migrant crisis from the global warming, and then we're going to, do this. I think
Yeah,
personally,
yeah, you're
just
you're
from a,
right. You're right.
yeah, that's what I think. It's
Maybe
not a
some
bad
people at the
theory, but maybe if we were in a movie, but like I think that's a
I
little bit
no,
too high
I was
IQ
saying
for them.
if I were to be strategizing for them, that's what I would be doing.
Gotcha.
Like if
Okay.
if if you were to put me in the chair, I
Right.
would absolutely say that they're consolidating too early. The migrant
Well,
crisis barely exists right now, and everybody's freaking out about a fake crisis, like be it from Europe or whatever. Like the Syrian refugees, it's a trickle now. It's not happening. It was happening. It's not, and they haven't updated their rhetoric. So them going all in on anti-immigrant stuff right now is going to
mhm.
negatively polarize people against anti-immigrant rhetoric in the future, which is really good because we're going
Good.
to really need that.
Well, that's a
Um,
silver lining.
yeah. Um,
Mhm.
that's the hope.
Right.
The second thing that the AMOC does is it transports warm water northward.
Wealth, fame,
So
power.
all those people that think,
I'm
oh,
Can you
not
stop for
worried.
one
Canada,
second?
Hakeem
oh,
Jeffries
sorry.
has a plan to be
Yeah,
a
you're fine.
consultant to the energy industry by 2030.
Thank you very much, Saki Tanuki, for another 5 tier on gifted subs. Appreciate you. Um, we can hope that Hakeem Jeffries pulls through for us. Anyway, sorry.
Absolutely.
You can
Oh,
continue.
you're all good.
I
Absolutely
would
agree
like
with those
to. I would
dinners.
like to wrap this up relatively soon.
All right. Yeah, I can always come back at a later date, or you can bring me on in a follow-up
Sure.
segment if you want to.
There seems to
Um,
be a lot to this, and I don't want
yeah,
to cut you off early, but if you could just
yeah.
give us the highlights.
The last bit of this is that
Mhm.
because it transports so much warm water into the northern hemisphere, all those people that think that climate change is going to make Russia and Canada the new like grain belt breadbasket of the world, they are dead wrong. It's going to freeze them out. Europe's going to turn into an ice box when all that Gulf Stream warm AMOC water stops flowing there. So our agricultural belts are going to get squeezed. It's going to migrate south and north at the same time and just become a smaller region. If they want to continue doing farming that far north, they're going to have to do like Iceland and have warm greenhouses. Because with all that water slowing down, it's going to cause colder winters. A lot of the Arctic sea ice retreat that we're seeing right now is going to slow down, but the Antarctic ice retreat is going to speed up. So we're
Mhm.
still going to be warming as a planet. It's going to be really bad. But without the Gulf Stream there, I really expect at the very least a slower cooling or slower warming up there than the rest of the world and more extreme winters. Maybe they get really hot summers, but they're also going to get really cold winters, and it's going to make it really hard to farm up there. So
Mhm.
people like Vivek or whatever that are like, oh, okay, we're gonna have Minnesota be like the breadbasket. It's going to be Russia. I think Vladimir Putin's convinced that climate change is good for Russia. It's not good for them. The AMOC shutdown, which is after the most recent, I think it's COP. They had it in Azerbaijan. It's a climate change conference. Several people published papers about how the AMOC is definitely shutting down, and like all the people that were naysayers about it, like they are very wrong. Like every signal is pointing towards it. Although there's a little bit of disagreement on how rapid it's going to be, but this is going to be very noticeable by like the late 2030s and should continue into like the 2100s if it indeed happens, and it's going to be very difficult to reverse that shutdown. That's
Right.
basically like the biggest things that are going to affect the US. There's other things that I could get into, and I'd love to, but like this is like the big one,
Okay.
and the rough timeline on it.
Okay, if we could just, in the last couple of minutes here,
Yeah.
could you just, is there anything that like the average person can do to like, help this at all? Like, can they
Yes.
go to their politicians? What do you recommend?
Everybody listening to this is like several times more important than the average person. I don't want to inflate your egos any more than they are. But it is super important that the left aggressively pushes in favor of addressing climate change, like really aggressively. Like this needs to be like the number one issue of the left is climate change. Everything else, a lot of the social stuff, the exploitation, the capitalism, it kind of slots into place once you have that. But like Dalinka in Germany needs to be screaming from the rooftops about climate change. The leftist coalition in France needs to be screaming from the rooftop about climate change. People like Bernie, AOC, the American progressive left, screaming from the rooftops that no quarter, we need to aggressively tackle this, and we can aggressively tackle this. And it's sort of one of those arguments where like there is no real response that conservatives can have. So it's extremely advantageous to the left, and it's super important that the left maintains the strongest positions on this. So if you can join your local like DSA, Working Families Party, whatever, community orgs like Elks Lodges, whatever it is, push climate change, make sure it's top of mind for people. That's the most important thing you can do, is that the left is the like a I want a very specific vision. It's the gray environmentalist left. The green environmentalist left is greenwashing, your paper straws. Gray environmentalism is if you want to protect nature, don't live in it. Live in efficient cities. It's going to make everything better. You can make them pretty. You can have plants there. But at the end of the day, preventing urban sprawl, making things more efficient, people that are pro-nuclear, that sort of thing. Gray environmentalism seems to be separating a little bit from green environmentalism, which is like we're going to have clean coal, greenwashed, astroturfed. A lot of the green parties around the world, they're highly ineffective, basically just spoiler parties. So making it very clear to people that the left has a very coherent, scientifically backed position on this, and that it is by far the best. That I believe, like if you as an average person, and there's not that many leftists, so I hope I'm speaking to a good chunk of them here. That's what you can do.
All right, Weatherfish, thank you very much. I know we talked a little bit about it on the call last time. I'm going to give you another chance if you'd like to shill anything. If not, that's totally fine. But I just want to give you that opportunity once again.
Subscribe to Paul Beckwith. Give his channel a little look. He could use some love. He's a very good resource for information about climate change. Very dense, maybe a bit obtuse, but you know what? Give him a platform. If we put that man in charge of the global response to climate change, it would be a very good thing.
How do you
If
spell
you
that?
put him as PaulBeckwith. I'm sure he'll be a little bit surprised to see an influx since he's not a super large channel, but if you want to just sort of know what's going on, he definitely is a little bit negative, but he's not doomer about it. He's just pretty realistic. If you want to give him a watch, have his audience overlap with the left broadly, I have a feeling that would be a good direction for things to go in.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on. That was very informative, and I think everybody here learned a lot, including myself.
All right. I look forward to talking to you about this more. I have a feeling as the left learns how to push this and make really like watchable, consumable, borderline slop content about it, it's going to do numbers. I really am confident about that. Um, just judging from the general disposition of like a lot of young people.
We can certainly hope so. I would like to see more attention given to this issue, and that's why I'm giving it as much as I can now. So,
All right. Thank you.
alrighty. Thank you. Have a great night and keep in touch, okay?
All right. You too.
Alrighty. Take care.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more, hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload. If you enjoy my content, you enjoy what I do, I really appreciate any financial help that I can get. Go to youtube.com/AlecGunterTTV/join. You got some awesome benefits, such as seeing early videos, awesome emotes that you can use in the comments of YouTube videos, and a sweet badge next to your name. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'd really appreciate if you join. It is cheaper than the cost of a blowjob from your mom. So with all that being said, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.